Following the release of A Link Between Worlds in 2013, the future of 2D Zelda looked bleak. 2015 gave us a multiplayer title with a nonsense story and linear, level-based gameplay, and once Breath of the Wild took the gaming world by storm, it was uncertain if there would be any new 2D Zeldas again. When Nintendo revealed Echoes of Wisdom this past June, these doubts were laid to rest, but one question remained. How would a 2D game hold up in this new era of open-ended, experimentation-driven Zelda? I'm here to offer my thoughts on that question. This review will be spoiler-free, covering only content shown in the trailers, but if you want to play this game completely blind, it might be best to run this video in the background instead of actually looking at it. The trailers do show off a few minor things that could be considered spoilers. With that said, this is FP Productions, and here's my review of The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Playing as Zelda instead of Link completely reshapes standard 2D Zelda gameplay. Combat is no longer a simple matter of mashing the sword button and occasionally shielding, but instead requires a much less direct approach. Using the Tri-Rod, you learn how to copy objects and enemies and have them do the fighting for you. The amount of echoes you can spawn at once is limited, and more useful ones have a higher cost, so you'll have to choose carefully and experiment with different combinations. Pairing different monsters together and finding optimal combos is satisfying, and combat generally feels more layered than in earlier games. However, this system can feel tedious or frustrating at times. Sometimes echoes take a while to close in on an enemy even when you're targeting it, or go in a nonsensical direction and accomplish nothing. Often, the outcome of a battle is determined by who gets the first blow, and combat amounts to spamming echoes until one of them finally gets the first hit. Thankfully, once you collect a certain item, you can enter sword form. If combat is taking too long, you can activate classic 2D Zelda gameplay for a limited time, allowing you to fight head-on with a sword, shield, bow, and bombs. This is particularly useful in boss battles, where echoes tend to be much less reliable. The change in protagonist also affects puzzle solving. While the game follows the open-ended approach of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, echoes essentially function the way items did in old-school Zelda, creating a satisfying blend of the two styles. There are multiple ways to solve puzzles, but they generally require echoes found in the region or dungeon you're currently in, meaning you'll continue to develop your toolkit throughout the game. The fact that you don't start out with every tool you'll need brings back a feeling of progression that was sorely lacking from the open-air games, but the amount of options prevents dungeons from being as linear as they once were. Unfortunately, around the midpoint of the game, it did start to have a similar power scaling problem to the open-air games. At that point, the flying tile echo solved 90% of my navigational obstacles, and the ball and chain soldier made most combat effortless. The Crawlchula echo, which you gain access to after the first dungeon, essentially turns the game into Breath of the Wild 2D, allowing you to scale any wall, including inside dungeons, effortlessly. I often avoided using this in the overworld, because it would take away from the magic of finding the way into a new area. When I did use it, it felt cheap and unsatisfying, not like I had actually solved a puzzle, but it seemed like the developers intended me to use it that way. This was something I had hoped to leave behind from the Wild era. To the game's credit, it does give you incentives not to skip everything. Oftentimes you need to visit certain rooms or caves to find unique echoes, heart pieces, a new collectible that allows you to upgrade your sword form abilities, or unique equipment that grants different status effects. One complaint I have with both open-air games is that everything you see within the first few hours is everything you're going to see, but Echoes avoids that copy-paste problem. Just like in older games, I never knew what I was going to find next, and discovering new secrets in the overworld was a continual delight. The game kept me excited to explore right up to the end. To conclude this section, I should touch on Bind, the other new ability. While not used to nearly the same degree as Echoing, this was another welcome addition that led to creative puzzles. Several dungeons require you to move an object from a distance without it getting damaged, and this makes navigation a challenge you can't simply skip over. Other times, you have to reverse bind so you follow the object, which presents some fun platforming sections. I don't need every Zelda game to follow this gameplay format, but I wouldn't mind seeing it one more time either. The plot of Echoes of Wisdom is a return to form for the Zelda series. It follows the classic formula of a beginning arc with 3 dungeons, a midpoint twist followed by 3 more dungeons, and one final dungeon to cap things off. And while straightforward, it reminded me why I fell in love with this series. Simply having a plot that developed as I progressed through the game made me more invested, and it allowed the game to build to a finale that paid off prior plot points in a satisfying way. This structure also allows plot twists to happen, and while I found the story's twists predictable, it was still satisfying to have those again at all. Despite following tried and true beats, the story is far from a copy-paste of older titles. The simple change in protagonist from Link to Zelda immediately changes the nuances of the plot. Instead of a young villager rising up to rescue a princess and save the kingdom, you play as the princess defending her kingdom and its subjects, a fresh take by the series standards. Even better, they did this in a way that bucked the trend of discrediting the former protagonist and actually respected Link and his legacy. Throughout the game, you learn more about his backstory and the impact he's had on people, and despite not being the main protagonist, he stands as one of the more interesting 2D iterations of the hero. The story's most intriguing feature outside its change of lead character is how it handled the villain. I can't go into details without spoiling the game, but it expanded the series' lore in a way that didn't contradict what came before, and led to some of those plot twists I mentioned earlier. While I personally figured out one main twist just from watching the trailers, it still added new dimensions, no pun intended. Overall, I would call this one of the stronger 2D Zelda stories. Echoes of Wisdom has a strong soundtrack. Various songs pay homage to older Zelda tunes while taking them in a very different direction, such as the Kakariko Village theme, and the original music is solid too. Most of it is upbeat and fun, but it offers some dramatic tracks too. It wasn't quite up there with the Link Between Worlds and Spirit Tracks soundtracks for me, but it did its job well. The side content is similarly solid, but not necessarily peak. Most side quests are over as soon as you activate them, consisting of showing NPCs a certain echo, or giving them a consumable item. A fair amount do have you complete a unique objective though. The most memorable one involved conducting an investigation and had its own little story arc. On top of that, there are various mini-games scattered throughout the world that each lead to different, sometimes pretty useful rewards. In the end, the side content was just enough to satisfy me, though I would have preferred a few more fleshed out quests. I have 2 major complaints with this game. One of them is the clunky menuing, which everyone has talked about. It's awkward, it's time-consuming, it basically has the same problems as the Tears of the Kingdom menuing. But again, everyone's already harped on this, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. My main issue with this game is its overall tone. To put it bluntly, this felt like a PBS Kids Zelda game. Character and location names are on the nose to a point that goes beyond endearingly cartoonish, and instead felt like the game was talking down to me, and many of the story arcs felt like something from an episode of Arthur. I was eager to explore the dynamic between the river and sea Zora, who appear concurrently for the first time, only for their conflict to result from a petty, childish squabble. The Deku, who dealt with real problems in Majora's Mask and had a believable society, have been reduced to entitled infants whose story arc didn't even feel like a real conflict. The one character who had a genuinely compelling, emotional story that resolved in a mature way was also a generic bumbling oaf type of character, the kind who refers to themselves in third person and doesn't use big words. The list goes on. This game's visual style exacerbated this problem. I was never a fan of this look for the series since its first use in the Link's Awakening remake, and despite how I've warmed up to it recently, it clearly influenced the developer's mindset while setting the game's tone. It's a strange direction for a series that has the likes of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess in it, and it's a shame considering how many compelling ideas the story has. With the right tone, the story could have been an epic one comparable to the 3D Zelda games, and I hope future entries take themselves more seriously. Echoes of Wisdom is a step in the right direction, merging the player experimentation of the open-air games with the engaging stories and creative dungeons of the older entries. By putting Zelda in the role of playable protagonist for the first time, it puts a fresh spin on combat and puzzle solving without straying too far from the series' identity. Its tone was too childish for my tastes, and the gameplay could use a few tweaks to perfect it. But as the first true Zelda experience since A Link Between Worlds, it brought back a sense of discovery and progression in a fun new way. As of now, it's landing on a score of 8 out of 10, and I'm excited for the future of 2D Zelda. Thank you all for watching. To my subscribers, I'm sorry I was gone for so long. I wish I could promise to post frequently again, but with where life is right now, I'm not sure how often I can expect to pump out videos. I am doing Tears of the Kingdom speedrun stuff on my gameplay channel, FP Plays, and I might start streaming if people express interest. Link in the description. Well, if you're still here, I might as well shamelessly plug my young adult action novel, which I self-published in April as well. It has nothing to do with Zelda, but if you're into superheroes, it might be your cup of tea. The link for that will also be in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.